I am a writer, a video creator, a guitarist, a poet. I dream of publishing my books, of creating videos full time, of scribbling poems in bottles and sending them out to sea. But when the world is burning, ice caps melting, genocides televised, I often find myself wondering, what's the point in any of this? What am I even doing with my life? People are bleeding, hungry, dispossessed, and I'm here making a video essay, writing a poem, strumming my guitar. The urgency of the times we find ourselves in seem to demand of us that musicians set down their instruments and storytellers give up their fictions for the real work out there in the streets, on the front lines. In times of crisis, whether war, economic collapse, or political repression, art is often the first thing to be sacrificed, dismissed as a luxury no longer necessary. So I keep returning to the questions. Is there any value in art when the world is on fire? Or is art simply a self-indulgent distraction from the serious political work? And if we do create art, should we insist that it provide a guarantee or at least favourable odds of the tangible, direct, positive world impact it will have? It can be tempting to say, we need to meet people's urgent material needs first, not focus on abstract, non-essential pursuits like video essays and music. Let us make sure of bread to begin with. We shall attend to the poetry and paintings later on. Yet the industrial workers of the world union song, Bread and Roses, which includes the powerful line,
"Hearts starve as well as bodies,"
reminds us that the hunger in humans for meaning, beauty, and joy through our eyes, our ears, our flesh is hardly less than our urgent compulsion for food. In a system where we are routinely taught to think of the world as dark and brutal, humans inherently selfish, where algorithms steal our lives, our spirits are crushed in the endless rat race, and almost everything sacred and meaningful has been commodified, art stands in the way of this doomsdaying. Art objects, art disrupts, art revolts against the idea that this is the way life must be.
The cave wall paintings at Lascaux, the Sistine Chapel ceiling, the huge truth of a Picasso, the quieter truth of Vanessa Bell are part of the art that objects to the lie against life, against the spirit, that it is pointless and mean. The message coloured through time is not lack but abundance, not silence but many voices. Art, all art, is the communication cord that cannot be snapped by indifference or disaster. Against the daily death, it does not die.
When art places its hand on our heart and we are, to an almost physical degree, touched and moved, there's a moment of grace and communion, a stirring of the soul.
A period during which we, too, know the hidden coherence of our being and feel the fullness of our lives.
Exposing the lie behind the brute dictum, there is no alternative. I can only speak for myself, but art reminds me that I'm here to do more than just be part of the assembly line of survival or the daily drivel of admin tasks. I'm here to play, to create, to have a mystical life of the greatest meaning and purpose. Art brings out of me the parts of myself that, because of the violent conditions of existence, are hidden from sight.
Art can uncover desires and appetites buried under the accumulating emergencies of our lives, the fabricated wants and needs we have had urged on us, have accepted as our own.
In tune with those neglected dimensions of myself, I begin to demand of my life pursuits that they feel in accordance with the longings, the joy, the creative expression I know myself to be capable of. And it lays bare the cruelty and absurdity of a system where creative minds filled with ideas, energy, and inspiration are forced to settle for the drudgery of work that slowly erodes the soul. Life should be an exhilarating journey of self-expression, not a monotonous grind for survival. And a system that stifles the expression of our gifts is nothing more than a tyranny that must be resisted. This is why systems of oppression seek to limit or shut down possibilities for creative self-actualization. People connected to their souls, their creative spirits, living from the inside out, galvanizing a sense of self outside of capitalistic machine-like existence, allowing that to inform and instruct their actions in the world would be too much of a threat to stability and order. Plato, the ancient Greek ideologue, was the first to recognize the danger of dreamy artists in our midst, disrupting the carefully crafted harmony of a naturally ordered society. In Book 10 of the Republic, he warns that artists awaken the part of the spirit that disrupts good reason, placing a
evil constitution in the soul of each individual,
where if it reaches audiences in the public square, it can incite revolt. Artists, therefore, have no place in any Platonic republic.
If you receive the pleasure-seasoned muse of song and epic, pleasure and pain will be kings in your city instead of law.
To submerge ourselves in the canon of great works, to appreciate the raw power of street art, or to listen to the sweet singing of the creative call within ourselves, usually requires us to slow down, become lost and absorbed in a state of flow, deep listening, and meditative awareness. It gives way to stillness, wonder, a different kind of human experience outside of constant fixation on productivity, busyness, and money-orientated activities. It cultivates a sacred place in our lives where beauty can be laid bare, where our spirits can be stirred, held, and lifted up. It's as if we're saying, "You can capture my body, but you cannot capture my soul. You may burn the world down, but still I will dance amidst the ashes." Art feeds what bread alone cannot, the wild, stubborn, beautiful hunger of the heart to feel there are other ways of being, another world is possible, that somewhere inside of us there's still colour, still breath, still song. At this point, I'm often thinking to myself, well, okay, it's all well and good for people like you, Kathrin, who are super privileged. Of course you can create and witness art. What about the majority of people who are barely making ends meet? Art is self-indulgent and bougie, a luxury for the elite. Your talk of art doesn't understand the realities of people's everyday lives. But if we need to own money and a room in order to create, as writer Virginia Woolf insists, what does Woolf make of
Phyllis Wheatley, a slave who owned not even herself?
kidnapped from her home in West Africa around 1760, malnourished, neglected, enduring unimaginable mental anguish. She had neither a room of her own nor the means to support herself, and yet in a world that enslaved her, she dared to create.
It is not so much what you sang as that you kept alive in so many of our ancestors the notion of song.
If art must come, as anarchist Mikhail Bakunin insists, from those who have tasted life's riches,
Contemplated it, imagined it, delighted in it, as a bird of passage knows the country he soars over on his migrations.
what does he make of the caged bird who sings without ever having flown?
The caged bird sings because it must. It must or die. Sometimes the melody arrived at in the cage is much more fetching, much more appealing, much more profound, much more poignant than the melody arrived at by the bird who's on the loose.
If, as scientist Stephen Jay Gould writes,
I am somehow less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops.
what does Gould make of those who created art in Auschwitz? Without materials, facing starvation, and under the constant threat of execution, they sketched in secret, smuggled out personal testimonials, or simply created for a sense of joy. In the camps, when 600 people were marched to the crematorium, Auschwitz survivor Philip Müller recounts, amidst gunfire and beatings, they lifted their voices and began to sing the Czech and Hebrew anthems, knowing it would change nothing and singing anyway.
It was as if they regarded the singing as a last kind of protest, which they were determined to stifle if they could.
My intention here isn't to say, well, if the enslaved, caged birds and people in Auschwitz can create, then what's your excuse? I'm not denying privilege matters. I'm very aware that I'm able to create because of the multiple privileges I possess. But when we relegate art to a luxury, something reserved for only the elite, we forget that art has always existed alongside terror, within oppression, against erasure. A system that relies on the majority of us to remain passive and take orders benefits from our insistence that art belongs to only a select few, not from a general populace accustomed to singing through our cages, keeping alive the notion of song and the mere insistence on voice, on beauty, on self, in the face of annihilation. I, for one, can say that without art, I don't know if I'd still be here. In processing the sexual violence inflicted on my 7, 8, 9-year-old body, I often turn to art to process the psychological, physical, and emotional scars. I literally write out my soul, putting it on paper for my mind to see. Some of that art I've been putting on Patreon as part of my monthly Patron-only videos. I sometimes wonder who I could have been, what I would have looked like, laughed like, loved like if none of this had happened. I can almost picture it, but not quite. The pain of imagining that version of me is almost physical. And yet there it is. A girl without nightmares of rape. A girl who can protect herself. A girl who can remain in her body. Without a proper channel for my suffering, that pain would have been trapped inside me, like a kind of poison, being too much to bear. Sometimes I don't even realize I'm processing some kind of trauma. It's only afterwards I realize the art is a shockingly raw and vulnerable form of public confession. Hidden dimensions of myself, secreted away in deeper layers of my psyche, find their way through my guitar, into my poetry, onto the page. Art coaxes out of me things I don't usually allow myself to feel, and the terror and trauma transfigures into something beautiful, giving me the sense that there's something meaningful I can make out of all this hurt. And it's not just the act of creating that helps me carry on, it's also the witnessing of creation. When the weight of the world becomes almost unbearable, a single piece of music, a line in a zine, a fleeting image takes me by the hand and says, "Kathrin, hold on just a little bit longer. It's worth it to still be here."
But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. To quote from Whitman, "O me, O life of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, what good amid these, O me, O life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. The powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse." What will your verse be?
I often feel so alone in this world. I rarely meet people who think like me, who see the world as I do. And there's nothing quite like the feeling of recognition in art, the feeling of encountering the world portrayed just as I see it. Art that gives voice to a feeling that has been in search of form. Art that is like a mirror in which I can see my buried reflection.
Is a thing that worries me sometimes whenever you talk about creativity, because it can have this kind of feel that it's just nice, or it's warm, or it's something pleasant. It's not. It's vital. It's the way we heal each other. In singing our song, in telling our story, in inviting you to say, hey, listen to me, and I'll listen to you, we're starting a dialogue, And when you do that, this healing happens. And we come out of our corners, and we start to witness each other's common humanity. We start to assert it. And when we do that, really good things happen. So if you want to help your community, if you want to help your family, if you want to help your friends, you have to express yourself.
Art isn't a luxury. It's not just for the privileged or something extra we get to do when life is easy. It's one of the ways we not only survive, but remember that we even want to. So we've seen art sustains us, but the question is, can it also sedate us? Is art the new opium of the masses? Does woke art like mine offer us the illusion of political engagement, making us feel rebellious, radical, enlightened, without ever fully immersing ourselves in the flesh and soil of a real struggle? We've had a break from conformist life, taken a stroll down counterculture, participated in the feeling of dissent, consumed protest like a product, so we can return to our lives freshly numbed, compliant, more comfortable in the conditions we quietly despise. Art as opium, though, doesn't seem to fully acknowledge the messy, complicated relationship between art and politics. On a personal level, though you could argue that my art detracts from my political work, I can honestly say I don't know if I would be as motivated to get out on the streets or even have the politics that I have if I didn't first give form to how I feel through the page. Art is what I need to make sense of what I think, to put into words the truth that tarries at the tip of my tongue, to get me passionate and riled up. My artist self feeds my political self. I don't know if I'd be one without the other. I very much relate to novelist Octavia E. Butler when she observed,
Every story I create creates me. I write to create myself.
in the same way, it's hard to draw a direct line between the art that I've witnessed and my politics, and yet I know there's been countless moments where a piece of art left me feeling like it rearranged my very DNA. It sparked questions, promoted reflections, shook loose entrenched beliefs. I left feeling like I could never look at the world the same way again. Amber Macy Blomfield wrote in Acts of Resistance the power of art to create a better world.
It seems to me that arguments about the efficacy of art often miss out the way the experience of art really moves people. Sometimes by offering a direct engagement with specific issues, it is true, but sometimes simply by creating a sphere for thinking, seeing, and being differently. How easy it is to overlook the potency of that, in the demand any of us with a social and political consciousness must feel to find the quickest solutions to the multiple crises we witness unfolding every day. How tempting to dismiss artistic gestures that do not make bold claims for the change they will make.
On a broader political level, the link between art and politics is also complicated. Art's impact is often overlooked because it's harder to measure, less visible or tangible. We think of big political changes as occurring due to big uprisings or one-time events, but overlook how art often laid the foundation for that uprising or that big event to occur. The Arab Spring is often thought to be rooted in the self-immolation of impoverished, police-harassed produce seller Mohammed Bouazizi, but we can also trace the origins of the Arab Spring back to art. The African-American music that became a global symbol for dissent and outrage, the comic book about Martin Luther King and civil disobedience that was translated into Arabic and widely distributed in Egypt shortly before the uprising, El General's song Mr. President, widely hailed as the anthem of the revolution, and the rapper who helped bring down Ben Ali. A piece of art we create might seem insignificant, a distraction, tranquilization, but perhaps it functions like what the activist Michaela Loch describes as the vast fungal networks between the earth, unseen but spreading wildly. In her analogy, the sprout that breaks through the soil, a shift in public consciousness, a collective victory, is only possible because of the slow, steady work underground. We can't judge the worth of art solely based on its immediate impact. Sometimes the tiniest seed yields the greatest growth, and at other times transformation springs from deep dormant roots or wayward seeds blown elsewhere by the wind. What is certain is that without that invisible web, there'd be no sprouts and no revolutions. And crucially, art doesn't just precede or precipitate political change, it also extends it, spreads seeds afterwards. After the masses go home, after the chants fall silent, after the temporary roadblocks are removed, what survives most visibly is often the art. A photograph, a song, a painting, a wall scribbled with Liberté in the Paris streets of May 68, the stenciled face of Naji Alali Handala watching from a bombed-out wall, a burning guitar at Monterey screaming louder than words. Art is the residue of revolution. It lives on long after the dust has settled, an ode to the old saying,
"You tried to bury us. You didn't know we were seeds."
Of course, there absolutely is art that functions as the opium of the masses, aesthetic rebellion, packaged dissent, art to reinforce the status quo. But if art didn't also contain a force capable of tearing down oppressive regimes, why are the powers that be so eager to shut it down, co-opt it, or employ artists as propagandists? Why have artists like El General been arrested, interned in concentration camps, labelled dangerous state criminals, imprisoned, exiled, killed? Loki, Immortal Technique, Akala were some of the artists most profound in my own political awakening.
When we celebrate going to jail, we are literally celebrating enslavement. The land where the lump are consumed by consumption. But some of you won't survive the changes the earth makes, swallowed by tsunamis, hurricanes, and earthquakes.
And yet I bet most of you haven't even heard of them because of how heavily they've been censored.
Using analysis of my brethren Loki, I know he sold thousands and thousands and thousands of albums with no radio, no TV, just off YouTube. Labels should be beating down his door if they want to make money, right? But his political message is just never going to be played on the radio. They tell us it's not marketable. What they mean is, again, it doesn't fit with the agenda of the people who control the music industry. It's not about conspiracy. What would be the consequence if the song Terrorist, for example, was that popular just off a YouTube video? What would be the consequence if it was played daytime on Radio 1? Do you think people would just suddenly not like the song and not listen to it? But what he's saying is unacceptable to be played at that time of day to that audience, not because it wouldn't resonate with them, actually quite the contrary, because if it resonates with them, what are the consequences of that? And what are the consequences of making someone like Kareem Dennis, aka Loki, a national superstar in a country like this? He's not harmless, he's got something to say. What are the effects on people's consciousness of making someone like that a pop star? This is not unique or new. A lot of people say, hey, it's conspiracy. No, throughout the ages, even in the Bible, they talk about singers and players of instruments, and their interaction with power. If we go from ancient Egypt to the griots of West Africa to the poetry of the Islamic world, the interaction between musicians and entertainers and power has always been there. If we talk about the classical world, where certain phrases were banned because they were considered devilish and demonic or associated with infidels, with the Moors, etc. So this interaction between music's spiritual and esoteric and human power and the power of the state and the church and all these other stakeholders in society. Has always been there. This is just a modern manifestation of it.
These censorious powers seem to know more than those who dismiss art as trivial distraction, tranquilization. Yes, art can be sedative, sweet, numbing, easy to consume, but it can also be soil and spark and seed. So maybe the question isn't whether art is the new opium, but whether we're willing to support and cultivate the kind of art that refuses to be buried, the kind that grows, the kind that germinates, the kind that is like a quiet root system feeding a forest yet to rise. Sometimes when I'm halfway through a poem, fleshing out a book I'm writing, or thinking about root systems, soil and seeds, I get the sense that I'm just so away with the fairies, hiding in fluffiness, fictions, abstractions, when the real world is built off of money, powers and brute force. My art can start to feel like a layer of gauze between me and everything urgent, raw and real. But then I think to myself, well, if my art is airy-fairy, then so is interests, stocks, capital, credit. It's all an illusion. Money is just a piece of paper with scribblings on it. Just as Greek gods, the kingdoms of ancient Africa and the Kin and Roman empires were imagined orders. In the same way, though our capitalist overlords may insist that our economic and social systems operate on cold rationality, in truth, hierarchies, borders, race, gender, laws, governments, patriotism are also products of the imagination, inherited dreams, fictions, stories we've been taught to believe in. They could just as easily not exist tomorrow. There's nothing inevitable about it. The world is something that we make up and could just as easily be made differently. And it is often here that artists lead the way.
I think hard times are coming when we will be wanting the voices of writers who can see alternatives to how we live now and can see through our fear-stricken society and its obsessive technologies to other ways of being, and even imagine some real grounds for hope. We will need writers who can remember freedom, poets, visionaries, the realists of a larger reality. We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art, and very often in our art, the art of words.
For hundreds of thousands of years, from the first handprint on a cave wall to ancient myths and speculative fiction, art has served as a playground, a site of experimentation, a place to cross the boundary between the real and the imagined, demand exploration of the unknown, and develop the flexibility of thought that our distant ancestors needed to imagine different ways of being and organizing society.
I think the difference that most artists have, the ones that I come across, we tend to think our opinions are a lot more important than other people's in some way. That often we feel as though we have the key to something. I don't think that we do at all. I just think we dwell on it more. We tend to look at the world as some usable substance more than a non-artist would. I think for many people, just getting through life is enough. That's a big enough task, but let alone having to look at the world and the universe and say, now, if I had my way...
The power of art to imagine and create the impossible might be one of the reasons why there's been such a shift towards realism in art, leading us to believe that nothing can change, and fostering a dystopian mindset more intent on charting the inevitable doom of the world than the possibilities for a better one.
It's no accident they eliminated arts programs in the 1980s under Reagan. Trump narrowed their imagination, attenuate their empathy, let them just be bundles of desires that these corporations can manipulate in order to convince them to be only consumers so that the profits can go up.
If the world is one great artwork, then we're all essentially artists of life, participating in the radical work of societal sculpture. To create, therefore, is a way of saying this world is not inevitable, another world is possible. Despite all that I've been saying so far, it's still really easy for me to feel like my art is pointless because it doesn't save lives, feed the hungry, clothe the poor. Art, no matter how compelling, I sometimes think, can never replace the real, practical, tangible efforts of organising, agitating, educating the masses. But the truth is, a gap exists between our intellectual grasp of what we face and our actual actions in the world. It's like everyone seems to think we're all screwed, and yet we're all just too zonked out to care. And it's precisely in this space that art enters.
Everybody is half dead. Everybody avoids everybody. All over the place, in most situations, most all of the time. I know I'm one of those everybody's. And to me, it is terrible. And so all I'm trying to do all the time is just to open people up so they can feel themselves and let themselves be open to somebody else. That is all. That's it.
Where attempts to explain the multiple crises we face through the serious stuff of facts, logic and theory have failed, art seems to affect change by bypassing the head and speaking directly to the heart.
When we are speaking academically, we are speaking as disembodied minds to other disembodied minds. And if there is any source of the massive ecological polycrisis, it is the fact that we are now so caught in our detached, abstracted minds and so cut off from our sensate animal flesh that we no longer feel what is happening to the river as it's being dammed up yet again, what's happening to the forest as yet another clear cut is coming through, what these droughts really mean to all the other animals here.
We can all recall art that has in some way broken through our numbness, made us feel carnally, viscerally, bodily. In my case, people tried to educate me about racial injustice, but it wasn't until I read Noughts and Crosses and watched Rabbit Proof Fence that I really felt how deep, dark, and abominable racism really is. Of course, I'm never going to fully know, but as novelist Marcel Proust notes, it is only through art that we enter the secret universe of another and truly fly from star to star. A journey that cannot be navigated by direct and conscious methods. I knew for so many years endless information about the refugee crisis. I even wrote my undergraduate dissertation on the subject, but it wasn't until I saw that one photograph of the drowned boy on the beach that I and thousands of others were aroused from our stupor and emboldened to agitate for political intervention. You could try to get me organised through endless strategy sessions, debates and meetings, and I'd be utterly unmoved. But put me in a group singing or drumming session and I'd feel it. Sisterhood, solidarity, cohesion, the kind that sustains the lifeblood, the lubricant, the circulatory system of community. One of the most powerful historical examples of art's affective power is Billie Holiday's haunting rendition of Strange Fruits.
Southern trees, they're strange. fruit.
So controversial and censored, the Times reviewed it disapprovingly as
a prime piece of musical propaganda,
but later hailed it as the
song of the century.
Yet Holiday offered no slogan, no manifesto, no rallying cry, just a haunting rendition of racial terror, paving emotional ground for the civil rights movement.
When she recorded it, it was more than revolutionary. She made a statement that we all felt as Black folks. She became one of the fighters. She could sing and make you feel.
That doesn't mean that the feelings evoked through art are always pro-social. There's art that justifies dictatorships, reinforces nationalism, glorifies wealth, and stirs up shallow patriotism. Art can either liberate or control, depending on who wields it and to what ends. If we do not shape the stories, the images, the symbols that stir the soul, others will weaponize the effective power of art in the service of oppression. So perhaps we don't need more data, more analysis, more noise. We need to feel, to stand breathless before a mural on a broken wall, to tremble at the jagged silence before a dancer's final leap, to taste the grit of a graffiti artist's spray can carving defiance into concrete. At this point, I'm often tempted to say, well, okay, sure, important political art that has a serious, tangible impact is important, but what about art like mine? My channel is tiny, my books likely never published, my guitar playing apolitical, my poetry just for me. Isn't it just all too frivolous, ridiculous, or unimportant to matter? Shouldn't we demand of art that it instruct, heal, make the world better? When I reflect on these questions, I often return to the powerful words of musician Nina Simone.
An artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the time. And at this crucial time in our lives, when everything is so desperate, when every day is a matter of survival. So I don't think you have a choice. How can you be an artist and not reflect the times?
Given the nature of this channel, you might think I'd be in agreement with Simone that art must reflect the times. And yet, though I do strongly believe there is no such thing as apolitical art, and that we all must be cognizant of when we're upholding unjust systems, aiding and abetting the status quo, or passively ignoring our political responsibilities, I still feel compelled to defend artists against the insistence that our art must always be able to prove its meaning, value, purpose, or political efficacy. Our next community call book club for patrons will be on Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear. And there's a line in that book that has always stuck with me where the writer Elizabeth Gilbert says,
"You're not required to save the world with your creativity. Whenever anyone tells me that they want to write a book in order to help other people, I always think, oh, please don't. Please don't try to help me. I mean, it's very kind of you to help people, but please don't make it your sole creative motive, because we will feel the weight of your heavy intention and it will put a strain upon our souls."
There really can be something profoundly off-putting about people too holy, sacrificial, self-righteous, altruistic, trying too hard to change the world. And often we murder our creativity by insisting it must do something in particular. That's why there's truth to the cliché that the work we do whilst procrastinating, the stuff that feels like play, messing around, that we make in secret just for ourselves, when we abandon all hopes of making it, becomes our best work. Unencumbered by the pressure to have an impact, it can be what it's supposed to be. The poet John Keats rejected
poetry that has a palpable design on us,
and believed that ultimately, by not placing a burden on our art, forcing or cajoling it into anything in particular, we could reach a quality that wouldn't otherwise be possible, creating beauty of a more transcendent kind with the capacity to
enter into one's soul.
Many artists speak of automatic singing, writing, drawing, art as coming from a source beyond The artist is merely an instrument for that which wants to be born through them to manifest.
I never felt it belonged to me. If I knew where songs came from, I would go there more often. It is a gift. Of course, you have to keep your tools sharp and you have to keep your skill in a condition of operation. But the real song, where that comes from, no one knows. That is grace. That is a gift, and that is not yours.
In that sense, trying too hard to achieve a certain outcome with our art can clog up the channel, preventing the art from coming through. It's better to simply allow the art to decide what it wants to be.
Some songs don't want to be recorded. Trying to capture them is trying to trap birds.
That's how I feel about my poetry. Capitalism squirts all over the bodies of billions of people as they choke and suffocate on clotted blood. Can you hold the poison in your mouth without swallowing it? Sometimes some things don't need to reach a broader audience. So although we'd all love to write the next magnum opus or create world-changing art, maybe our true artistic impulse is to create something apolitical or absolutely awful, and maybe that's okay. After all, what would the world be without a little bit of escapism? Even the renowned theorist Bell Hooks needed some guilty pleasures in her life.
As you guys are probably tired of hearing, Bell is a sicko, passionate reader, a book slut who can go anywhere in life without a book, who reads books every day. Well, I try to read one nonfiction book a day, and then I get to read lots of trash in the wee hours of the night. I like historical mystery romances because I find that at the end of the day, I just can't think anymore about race, gender, capitalism. So, I think about romance instead.
I like to think Bell Hooks wouldn't have been half the revolutionary that she was without some romance trash to switch off with at night. Needing our work to be extraordinarily impactful for us to even bother making it can prevent us from making the romance trash or whatever the work is that is ours to do.
Isn't one of the reasons why the world is in the state that it is because everybody mortgages what is really pulling at their heart for the sake of something abstract, for the thing that they think that they have to do for the numbers to work out, to suppress the care, because the numbers, the metrics, the rational plan demands that you pay attention to this other thing.
Ironically, the belief that we must do something big and exceptional ends up dismissing the quiet, beautiful strivings of the bulk of humanity, those collective acts, shared and small, that we need to do in order to sustain a livable planet.
What I see as the waste is the waste that we make of that possibility of cooperative intelligence. Being an artist, you hear a lot of talk about genius. Which is the process of singling out certain people in art history and saying those were the important ones, Picasso, Rembrandt, Shostakovich, whatever. Whenever you look at any of those artists, you find that they lived and drew from a very, very active, flourishing cultural scene. And they were only one of the elements in that scene. All these people who are called genius actually sat in the middle of something that I call scenius. S-C-E-N-I-U-S. So just as genius is the creative intelligence of an individual, scenius is the creative intelligence of a community. And what I want to see is more attention given to that possibility of creative behavior.
That doesn't mean that we can't make serious political, world-changing art, but we usually don't get there by forcing it. Art is much more unpredictable and cheeky than we can plan for. Meaning or impact is often only discovered after having created something. What we end up with is rarely what we expected. In fact, this very video was initially supposed to be unsolicited pieces of advice about creativity, but ended up being something entirely different. I still made that video and put it up for patrons as one of my monthly patron-only videos, but essentially what I'm trying to say, I think record producer Rick Rubin put best when he wrote,
"It's best to wait until a work is complete to discover what it is saying. Holding your work hostage to a meaning is a limitation. Works that attempt to overtly preach a message often don't connect as hoped, while a piece not intended to address a societal ill may become an anthem for a revolutionary cause."
Measuring art's utility mirrors capitalism's obsession with quantifiable outcomes, metrics, profits, sales, wins and losses. Maybe therefore there's something inherently subversive about the type of worldview that refuses permanency, refuses to capture, to spread, to propagate. A way of being that allows art to exist for its own sake, for the simple joy of creating. Art that harkens back to a time before capitalism, where people sang, drew, sculptured without any prestige, prize, or payment, because something within us wanted out, because we longed to gift our creations to the people we loved, no matter how ephemeral or fleeting, because storytelling, decorating, rituals, games were seen as part of what it meant to be human, to live in community, a birthright of the people.
No, but that's it. That is it. If we could have a world of people pursuing Terminator 2, knowing that it could be deleted the next day, it would be such a more beautiful world. If it would be making things to make them, not to have them seen.
I want to have it all. Yes, art that is explicitly political, but also art that refuses meaning, purpose, impact. Art that moves in mysterious and unpredictable ways. Art that doesn't offer answers. Art that is fun, frivolous, ridiculous. Art that draws attention to a different schema of values and other ways of being. Art that brings creativity back to the common possession of the people. So yes, I'm a guitarist, a writer, a poet, a maker of things that don't always make sense in a world on fire, and I still believe it matters. Because in times like these, yes, we need organisers, agitators, educators doing the serious political work, but we also need art. Art that feeds the soul, art that reminds us that we want to survive, art that plants seeds, art that stirs the heart, art that shows us other ways of being. And in a world that tries to censor, shut down, co-opt, art is a field of struggle, not a fleeting afterthought to dismiss or romanticize. We don't need to spark a global revolution with every stanza or song. We don't even need to reach a single soul. Like a message in a bottle, we create raw, trembling, unpolished, and we cast it into the sea, not knowing where it will land or if it will land at all. We simply surrender to the quiet integrity of making what feels raw, urgent, and alive, with all the love, courage, and devotion we can muster, not because it's strategic or guaranteed to matter, but because something inside of us was aching to be expressed. Hoping that the salt-stained fragments hauled in from the tide, uncorked by the hearth and read by the firelight, will turn into gold. Maybe that's what art really is, a constellation of small bottles drifting through the dark, each one holding a piece of our heart, our longings, our wonder. So make your offering, let what is within you out. Create what burns in your chest, then release it, set it adrift. Though you may never see the ripples, let the tide carry it where it must. I would so love if you could share what piece of art has impacted you most and in what ways it has impacted you, what you are creating now and how you feel about it in times like these. Liking, sharing, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and becoming a patron or leaving a one-time tip on Ko-fi or PayPal is really the lifeblood of this channel. I really couldn't do it without my Patreon support in particular. In exchange for the cost of a coffee, you get access to a whole backlog of patron-only videos, the bi-weekly book club and community calls we are doing. As I said, the next book club will be on Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear. Our next community call discussion will be exactly on this topic discussed today. And if you want some unsolicited advice on creativity, you can watch it here, or you can watch my video on creativity called Make Bad Art, You Are an Artist. Thank you so much to Janine for editing this video, and I've linked a bunch of resources for anyone that wants to get into creativity in the description box alongside all the references of this video. I wish you all a beautiful day, and I hope you can create in some way. Goodbye.